Hello, Dreamcatchers, and welcome to Season 5 of the Writer's Haven Show. I am your host, Helena, and when I think about how we started this show 2 years ago and consider where we are today, I get chills, and I'm thankful. And it's all because of you and the overwhelming support you've shown us. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. We have so much in store for you this season, and I can't wait to give you highlights for the upcoming season, but we're going to do that at the end of the show because I want to introduce to you our first Season 5 guests. Paulette Gaines is the author of 2 books, The Noble Anthony and His Lady Cleopatra, and The Noble Anthony and His Lady Cleopatra Return Home. They're wonderfully written, and Paulette's debut novel, actually both of them, is an international bestseller. And that's a pretty great start for a first novel. But what is much more inspirational about Paulette's accomplishment is that she is living with the lifelong challenges of dyslexia. So here to talk about her accomplishments as a gifted writer and her process for writing is international best-selling author Paulette Gaines Wood. Welcome to the Writer's Haven, Paulette.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Now, you must start off by introducing us to these 2 gorgeous creatures here. Who are they?
All right, this is the Noble Anthony, a beautiful and very handsome English Mastiff, and his wife of many centuries, the Lady Cleopatra, who is an Abyssinian cat.
Oh my goodness. I mean, immediately, many questions jump up. Okay, you said wife. They're different species. So how did that evolve?
Well, love is love.
Okay.
And that's really just what it comes down to. They are completely devoted to each other. Matter of fact, Cleopatra really doesn't care too much about anybody else.
Okay.
But she is completely devoted to, as she calls him most of the time, her Anthony.
Okay, okay.
That's just what it comes down to. Love is love.
And she's sitting on his head, and I know on both covers, that's how she positions herself.
Well, outside of the family home, this is her mode of transportation.
Okay.
Because when they were together in ancient Egypt, when cats were, well, as Cleopatra put it, a time when humans were wiser and worshiped cats as they should.
Ah, okay.
See, then she had bearers to carry her around when she left the temple.
So she was used to that
So
kind of...
now this is kind of a plan B. So because her feet rarely touch the ground when she's outside of the family home.
Well, Paulette, I have to tell you, I absolutely loved your book. From the very first page, I was very drawn to it. Very drawn to the story. And as I, looked and did some research about the genre, it, for the most part, came up as a children's book. Was that your intention? Because I, as an adult, and knowing some of the history in terms of Egyptian culture, and also, the dogs. I have a dog. I'm a dog lover. So the themes and actually the way that it was written, I'm not saying that a child couldn't read it, but it actually had an attraction to me as well. So was that your intention when you
Well,
wrote the
I
book?
kind of wanted it to be able to fit across genres. So yes, there's something here that children would enjoy. The boys in the family are, very important in their interactions. But actually my biggest fans are adults. And there's some little special things that I put in for the adult who's reading it or might be reading it to a child. An example of that is that the father of the family comes home one day and his wife is so upset that something's happened with Cleopatra. And she's explained it to him, but he just doesn't get, he understands what happened, but he just doesn't get why she's so upset about it. And so he falls back onto what all husbands do when they pretty much have no idea what's going on, and simply says to her, "It's all right, dear. We'll work it out together."
Right.
See, any adult reading that
Can definitely relate to that.
Understand.
So you're just trying to make me go away. That's
Yeah.
why you're just trying to ease the situation. Okay, so let's talk about, before we really get into the process, I want to highlight the fact that you have been able to publish 2 books back to back, the first one in 2017, the second one in 2018, and we'll talk about how long it took each book to be written when we talk about process. But you did this with this challenge of dyslexia. And I just want to, hone in on that a little bit, because I know there's a lot of people that are either well-versed on dyslexia and what it means, and others who think that they know but don't really know. How challenging was it to write?
It is very, I mean, in early school, elementary school, especially at the time, it was very popular for students to stand up and read to the class. And when you're dyslexic, you're kind of, basically you just don't see the letters and everything the way everybody else does. So it's like you're translating from another language all the time. And, to be told that you're an intelligent person, but still have such a horrible time in some subjects, like reading, like spell. Any 4th grader can outspell me. To this day, I have very little idea of how the letters actually go together.
I find the older I get, I start having that issue too.
So, yeah, it was very hard. And now the good part is, because I come from a family of educators, and my mother wasn't always that patient with why I didn't read well, but I think because of that, she let my brother and I read anything that we were willing to read. She was willing to let us read. And matter of fact, some things as I look back on, I thought, oh, maybe that one wasn't such a good idea. And we had, in the little town where I grew up, we had a 1-room library. Mrs. Allen was our librarian.
Where are you from?
New York and New Jersey, very early,
Okay.
and then later a small town in southern New Jersey called Absecon.
Okay.
Absecon's one claim to fame is that it's the very first city mentioned in the zip code directory.
Oh,
It was
okay.
the ABC.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay.
that's our big claim to fame.
Okay. And one reason why I asked the question about where you're from, because I noticed that in your writing, definitely in the first book. I'm not sure with the second book. I think with the second book you did a lot of time. You had a lot of time in Egypt, but Bowie, the city of Bowie in Maryland, was the location for your book. You want to talk about that a little?
Well, I've lived in Maryland for December of this year will be 40 years, and lived in Bowie for about 37, 38 years, something like that.
Yeah, because there are a lot of landmarks in your story.
And
that
I never thought of placing the family anyplace else, because we have always had good friends and neighbors here. Always felt a good sense of community, and that was one of the things I wanted to relay in the stories. People, friends and neighbors coming to help a family at a time. Also a community that's very accepting and open. So everybody in the town knows Anthony and Cleopatra.
You've put Bowie, Maryland on the map for sure, being, a best-selling author, and anyone who didn't know about Bowie and Maryland,
They do
being
now.
in Maryland, they do now. They most certainly do. So, okay, so with the challenges of dyslexia, and you had mentioned, actually, I think you mentioned this in the green room, about a teacher who inspired you with your writing very early on in your.
When I was in high school, I had a wonderful teacher, Marion Ross, who came to teaching from a long career in the publishing industry. And she decided as her retirement job, she wanted to teach high school English. And I was fortunate enough to have her for both my sophomore and junior year. And when she looked at the things that I wrote, yes, she was a teacher, she had to make corrections. But she also looked at the story itself and the characters and the flow and how characters were developed and everything. So she looked beyond my spelling mistakes, and to those types of things.
Which a good editor would. And she was basically acting as your editor.
And she said to me, you know, I can't make you any promises, but I think you might really have something here.
Yeah.
Well, for a 16, 17-year-old, it's like, you know, this was carved in stone.
Oh, yeah.
So, matter of fact, in my high school yearbook, where it's this line to talk about, you know, what you want to do in the future. And in my book, it says, win a Nobel Prize in literature.
Ah, okay.
Because, hey, Mrs. Ross had said it was going to happen.
Okay. Okay, you're going to be up there with Toni Morrison and the rest of them. That's awesome. That's a great goal. So let's talk a bit about your process then. And how did you birth these characters?
Well, that was very slow coming because when I started out, well, most things were handwritten or typed. And typing is very slow and cumbrance when you're trying to, you know, figure out the letters where they are and how they are. But fortunately, as I got older, computers came about.
What did we do before they came around?
Which helped a lot, but at the same time, I mean, when I heard about spell check, you know, I thought this was put together just for me personally. But for the dyslexic, what happens with spell check is that many times you are given a list, a choice in the words. And I don't necessarily know the difference in the various words. So organism and orgasm, not really interchangeable.
Yeah, that might be a problem.
So that in itself makes life very interesting. But as Mrs. Ross had told me years ago, you know, write about the things that you know. And my family has always had lots of pets, and our friends had pets. So this really came down to being what I know. And so that's why.
But they have very distinct characteristics. So are they people in real life and you made them animals? or is this really George, your husband? Or?
Oh, no. No. Actually, the Lady Cleopatra has a lot of my brother.
Okay, okay.
But they kind of came to me themselves. Like, we've had a lot of cats. We have a beautiful Norwegian forest cat right now named Sophia, who we got at a shelter, and she had amazing green eyes, 3 different shades of green in her eyes, just like we described Cleopatra. She's 19 years old, and she is the queen of our house.
Okay.
So much of Cleopatra actually came from our Sophia.
Got it, got it.
But many of the other animals in the book were either pets of ours or pets of our friends. Like the character of Buddha Kali, who's a big calico, and the cat burglar of the community. Well, we had a big calico named Buddha Callie, 22 pounds at her height, full-figured girl, and she did steal. She stole my wedding ring, she stole the car keys, she would go into drawers and pull out socks. She was quite a cat burglar. Now, of course, in the book, she starts out with small items like that, but of course then she moves on to bigger items like the 5-piece set of lawn furniture, a riding lawnmower that she brings home to her family. And no one will ever forget the Sunday morning they woke up and found a small child sitting at the foot of the bed. So I expanded on the personalities of a lot of animals that I've known.
Yeah, masterfully done as well. Because the characters truly come to life. And, you know, as I was reading it, I was thinking, surely these are based on real life experiences of your own or people that you know that may have told you about their experience. So tell me, as you were writing the first book, did you know that you were going to write a second book? And are these 2 books in a series of books?
No, when I wrote the first book, that's real. Matter of fact, I even said to my husband, because when the first book came out and people immediately started talking about, oh, when is the next one? And I said to him, okay, you need to know that's all I had.
That's all I got in me right now.
Everything went into that first book. And so actually starting the second one was really very challenging and kind of scary, because the first book stories had been in my head for years. I have been telling family and friends these stories forever. For the second book, I had to come up with completely new things. And as any would-be author knows, there's that moment of, do I have anything else? And do I have anything else to say that people are going to enjoy as much as they did in the first book? Because you don't want to lose or disappoint the fans that you have gotten.
And that's one thing that I read in the reviews for your book. People who had read the first book, almost every review was asking, when is the second one coming out? So you came and you brought the demand, and you filled the demand for it. And the reviews for the second book are just as good as the first one. So I think that you hit the mark in doing that in such a short period of time, especially when you're saying that the stories that you had put in the first book you knew for years. You had them, you've been telling them for years. But for the second book, was that like a clean slate and you just kind of had to build?
It truly was. And it was kind of fascinating for me too, because I came up with this new character, because the main part of the second book is this adventure they had in ancient Egypt. And I came up with this character called Ben-El, and I was sitting there, writing his history some. I really had no idea what I was going to do with him and what part he was going to play. But as I went on, that came to me.
Just evolved.
And he really became a kind of neat and interesting character. And in one area, he's playing this game called Sete, which is one of the most ancient board games ever found.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that. Why did you pick ancient Egypt as the place that would be your location in book 2?
Well, this is where they came together, because the Egyptians did worship cats, all right? And to use these 2 animals, the Mastiff is a very ancient line of dogs, and so is the Abyssinian, an ancient line of cats. And the Egyptians did worship them. They found mummified cats So it just seemed to be the perfect place for them to come together.
And it sounds like you did a lot of research too, and bringing that authenticity to your writing.
Well, you know, I grew up watching a lot of what my friends call toga and sandal movies.
Okay, okay.
So,
Like Elizabeth Taylor and Cleopatra.
yes.
Okay.
And so it's kind of an era I always liked.
Yeah.
And, but there were definitely things that I discovered as I went along. But it was just perfect for them. Today, a mother cat is referred to as a queen. And so that made sense for Cleopatra to be queen of the temple of Beset. Beset is the Egyptian god with the face of a cat and the body of a woman.
Okay.
And so this is who Cleopatra calls on for assistance.
Okay.
And they're just things that just clicked in my head.
What's next? Do you have any other projects that you're working on that are they still in alignment with our main characters here? Or are you thinking about doing something
there
different?
is a third book. A working title is The Noble Anthony and his lady Cleopatra share playhouse stories.
Okay.
And since they have lived with so many families over the centuries, matter of fact, in the second book, they even mention a time that they were with President Lincoln.
Oh.
All right. But they've met other animals and they've had adventures with other animals in those families. And so I thought it might be a nice time to share some of those stories that they know of.
Do you outline? Do you take?
Now, I tried when I started writing the first book. I tried outlining because, well, I had read this is what authors do.
Well, whatever works for you.
And with all this Roman numerals and A's and B's and 1 and 2, and it's like, okay, I will never get anything done. What works for me is to kind of write like a shopping list.
Okay.
So for each little section, I write a list of things that are supposed to happen in each section. And sometimes those things might be moved around a little bit and they might be expanded on. But that gives me a guideline of this is what's going to happen.
And you'll put down the things that you want to happen.
I want to be sure.
Under that,
and that's a good way to help me so that I don't forget something important.
That's a really good strategy, actually.
Or you can look at your list and say, oh, I need to add such and such here. So when they have in the chapter in book 1, what is it? They have an adventure. I can't even think of the chapter with right now, which is really bad. But the child falls into the ice, and part of the rescue team comes, you know, to get Anthony and the boy out of the freezing water and save both of them. Well, I realized you need to know a little bit about the 2 men who are going in to save them.
Oh, okay.
And that came to me in just looking at my list and this happening. And as these guys are talking to Anthony and encouraging him to keep the boy up out of the water and to keep paddling, yes, how do they know to talk to an animal and to try to calm them? So that's why we need to know a little bit about the rescuers.
Okay, okay. And so what advice would you give to an aspiring writer who's looking to one day become an international bestseller?
It sounds very simple, and I hate to sound like a Nike commercial, but I have to say, just do it. just write. Or in my case, because I wasn't good at writing, tell your stories. And we live right now in a wonderful time. There is a thing called self-publishing.
Yeah.
You are not just in the hands of waiting
Right.
for a publisher
To pick
to
you up.
accept or reject. You can go ahead and get it out there yourself. Don't wait till you're 70 years old to start.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And so that's why I say
Although
just,
you can start at any time. But
yes, you can start at any time,
Yeah,
and
that's one
definitely
good thing about
it
writing.
has been very rewarding. Matter of fact, when I was in my teens, I would tell family and friends that I felt if there was to be any acclaim and success in my life, I would prefer for it to come later in my life, because I felt I would appreciate it more
Okay.
than if you have a big blow up thing when you're 20. And I always thought of the actor Orson Welles, who did have the biggest fame in his career
Yeah.
when he was in his 20s, and kind of spent the rest of his life kind of chasing that fame and never really getting back to that point again. So I figured, yes, if I'd taken a few knocks in the head and had some disappointments, by the time I got to this success, yes, I would really understand it. I would really appreciate it, know how valuable it truly is.
Well, Paulette, thank you so very much for visiting us in the Haven. Really, really appreciate your insight and for the great golden nuggets that you've dropped for our dream catchers who are listening. And dream catchers, thanks for joining us today in the Haven. You can stream this and other shows on any of our 9 streaming platforms, including iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube. And don't forget to tune into our newest streaming partner, the American Legacy Network. This season is shaping up to be even greater than the one before, with more interviews with New York Times bestselling authors, award-winning filmmakers, platinum-selling songwriters. And new this year, we will showcase the work of award-winning playwrights. What's not to love about all of that? Well, hold on to your seat and check out our website at www.writershavenshow.com for more exciting happenings in the Haven. And that's all for now, but until next time, catch fire on purpose. Hello, dreamy people, and welcome to another exciting season of the Writer's Haven Show. I'm Helena, your host and executive producer. Since 2017, we've invited you into the Haven, where we showcase the passion, process, and projects of writers of literature, television, film, and music. Over 2.5 million of you are tuning in to one of 23 channels or streaming us on iHeartRadio, Sonos, Spreaker, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, Alexa, and YouTube. We appreciate the love and hope our programming inspires and motivates you. We drop new episodes every week, so subscribe and never miss a show. I want to stay connected to you, so hit me up socially on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr at Author V. Helena, at Writers Haven Show with V. Helena. I look forward to seeing you in the Haven, and until next time, catch fire on purpose.